Your value and your worth as a human is far deeper than physical appearance and physical aesthetic. I personally value how people treat me and how people treat others far more than how they look. So many things are occurring that I need to tell you about. Obviously, TFNL coaching is now a thing in which I'm coaching clients online. And at the moment, I have no slots available. It is full. But I will be looking at taking more clients in the near future. So if you want to join the TFNL coaching waiting list, then please fill out the form down below in the description box, because that's how you can do so. And then I can obviously contact people directly. Other bits and bobs, as you know, obviously TFNL Shorts and TFNL Gaming are both new channels I've created. So again, they're linked down below in the description. Next video is slightly different. We've got a couple of men on the agenda that I've been meaning to cover for a while. We've got both Obi and Jeremy who have come up in the comment section before, so I will be covering them in the next video on Monday. So many exciting things. Just keep an eye out for what's occurring. Today's video is going to be a bit different in the sense that this is something I've kind of been working on and kind of been thinking about for a few months now, because obviously a while back I did the Natty or Not series many moons ago, and again I did consider bringing that back at some point, which I certainly can, but then my friend actually suggested, what about how to spot a BBL? As when I was kind of going through that series, a lot of people said, oh, although they may not be necessarily on PEDs, have you ever considered they might have had surgery done? So for example, a Brazilian butt lift or something along those lines. Not only are PEDs probably a lot more common in the industry than you might think, I question whether surgery might be more common in the industry than many of us might think. And that's kind of what we're going to go to today. But obviously before we do so, we're going to do the bits and bobs that need to be done. Like with all my videos, if at any point you decide you like the video, laugh at the video, or learn something from the video, then please do consider either liking the video or maybe even subscribing to the channel and perhaps clicking the bell next to it so you get notified when I upload every week, twice a week. If you have a question you want me to answer at the end of my next video, then drop it down below in the comment section for comment question of the week, and I shall certainly do so. I think this might well be one of the last headbands today. Oh, it stays in frame just about, so basically it looks a bit weird because it's got eyes. It kind of looks like Jigsaw from Saw. Obviously I've never seen that movie because, to be frank, I'm not very good with horror movies because not only do they scare me, they also give me nightmares as well. As a man, I acknowledge that I have no right to pass judgment on the choices a woman has made, and also on the body of a woman. And that being said, actually, I don't think, regardless of my gender, I have a right to pass judgment on the choices anybody makes or the body of anybody else. And when it comes to the surgery side of things, same with PEDs, being obviously performance enhancing drugs, it's a personal choice. I'm a big believer of, your body, your choice. And I respect personal choices, and I respect that if you want to do something for you because it enhances your life or it's simply something you want to do, then I fully respect it. But what I struggle to respect is people who lie about it. It's easier to do so with PEDs, but it's a bit harder to do in the realm of surgery. Either don't say anything about it at all or be honest about it, but please don't lie about it, because lying can be very damaging, and that's something I am going to cover towards the end of this video when I kind of speak more about the mental health side of things. And there are so many kind of ideas of what you could potentially look out for. Like, we know when you're on PEDs, there are some pretty obvious telltale signs, but with surgery it's a bit harder, because with PEDs you can't determine how you respond to it, and you can't determine how you essentially react to it from a physical perspective. But with the surgery side of things, you can, to an extent, in the sense that depending on maybe the surgeon or the procedure, or the extent of the procedure I should say, you can make it a bit less obvious and you have a bit more say and control over how obvious that is. Again, there are still some ideas of what could be worth looking out for when considering, has somebody maybe had some surgery done, especially when, like I said, talk about BBL, so Brazilian butt lifts. And if you aren't aware what a BBL is, it's essentially a surgery where the doctor is going to transfer fat from other areas of your body into your bum. So that could come from abdomen, hips, lower back, thighs, anything like that. It essentially takes fat from one place and puts it somewhere else. And that's a relevant point, because one of the big telltale signs of a potential BBL is lack of contractile tissue. So what I mean by contractile tissue is muscle. Obviously you're transferring fat from one area to another, therefore that tissue, being fat you're transferring, is not contractile tissue. It cannot contract. You cannot control what it does. With a muscle, if I say squeeze your biceps, you can contract that muscle, therefore that muscle is contractile tissue. If I say I'm going to squeeze my belly fat, for example, I can't do so because I cannot tense fat. I cannot contract fat. And one of the big things we look out for is, can you see the muscle contracting essentially? Can you see the glutes contracting and working? It's more of a question of no, that could be a consideration. Another thing to identify is lack of hip dips. So you'll notice as fat is being displaced from one place to another, hip dips might not be as prominent anymore. Another thing to consider is also the belly button. As we can see here, is sometimes you'll notice that the hips rise up above the belly button. So here it's pretty obvious and notable that the belly button is lower down than the hips. I'm not saying this is a definitive foolproof means of identifying something, it's merely just a potential consideration when looking out for these things. If the person is largely disproportionate, so they may have a really large glute area, so a large bum essentially, but have really small legs perhaps, then there is consideration of maybe that could be due to surgery, because in a lot of cases effective glute training will incorporate other muscles like the quads and the hamstrings. Therefore, limited growth in those areas but mass growth in the glute area could identify that perhaps that's not necessarily a product of training, but maybe a product of surgery. Again, not definitely, but it is a consideration. And one of the things you can't really use to identify whether somebody has had surgery is size, because just because it's small doesn't mean it hasn't been enhanced, and that applies to PEDs as well. Just because somebody may not look enhanced doesn't mean they haven't or aren't currently taking something. I know a few men who I have seen in person who I know are enhanced. You would look at them and think they must be new to the gym, because they're not, it's not obvious. They're not particularly big, they're not particularly shredded and like lean. They just look like a normal, maybe newbie to the gym, which is fine. But again, that highlights and identifies that you can't necessarily use size as an indication all the time. And the same applies with like BBLs. Just because it's not big doesn't mean it may not have been enhanced to an extent. Another thing to consider is posing. Just because it may look enhanced on a photo doesn't necessarily mean it is enhanced. Because when you pose, if you pose well with good lighting, you can make your body do all kinds of things, and you can make your body look all different types of ways. Many times I've seen fitness influencers and creators that on their pictures on Instagram look absolutely massive, then I've seen them in person and be like, wow, you're not what I expected you to be. Just because it may look really enhanced in a photo, will it necessarily look that enhanced in person? Again, it's really hard to identify these things just from pictures. It's maybe a bit easier to identify these things through videos or in real life interaction. To clarify, before we kind of go into the next section of the video, I'm never going to state who I believe has or hasn't had a BBL, because again, it's merely an opinion, and to be honest, my opinion on a woman's body doesn't matter, and it's not something I want to give because it's not appropriate. But what we can do is we can look at some things together and you can formulate your own opinion. So a few of the names that actually commonly get brought up in the BBL realm, and this kind of comes on to an old video I did on Ashleigh Jordan, is a lot of people have questioned whether Ashleigh Jordan has had a BBL. This largely comes from, again, what I've heard from people is when she's maybe training, the potential lack of contractile tissue, when she's going through movements, people feel like it's really harder to see the glutes working. And then the other argument is it disproportionate? Are the glutes disproportionately big for the rest of her body? It's hard to identify the belly button thing because we can't really see it here. Those are just points that people mention. Whether she has or hasn't is something that I'm sure only she knows, and something that you can form your own opinion on, but I don't necessarily think it's something we should judge her for, and I'm going to get to that very shortly. Another person who actually came up, which really caught me off guard actually, was Pamela. I had some people say that they believe that her glutes are disproportionate to her body, and there are some considerations that lead them to believe that she may have had some enhancement to some degree, and also this kind of supports the fact that just because something isn't necessarily massive doesn't necessarily mean it hasn't been enhanced. You look at Pamela, she's obviously got well-developed glutes, but she also does a lot of glute work. I've seen a lot of her glute workouts. Sometimes the movements are ineffective, sometimes the movements are pretty good. I've seen her do some split squat variations and stuff like that, which again target other muscles beyond just the glutes. But if her emphasis is primarily placed on the glutes, that might explain the slight disproportionate building of muscle between the glutes and her other leg muscles. And one person that has been raised, which again is actually a new name for me, someone I'd never actually heard of before, this individual called Sumeet, based on what I'm hearing, has made it a lot more obvious that she might have had enhancements performed. And again, we look at these images, are the glutes disproportionately large? Arguably yes, again that's subjective. Where are the hips sitting? Again, they're kind of tying up with the belly button, but they are typically a bit higher than you would normally expect. Lack of contractile tissue could be a consideration because arguably that could be occurring here. Again, I can never definitively state, I can merely give my opinion. Again, those are just a few of the names that came up. Again, I'm never going to hyperanalyze whether I think they have or haven't, because like I said, I don't think it's appropriate. If it were around the realm of PEDs, so performance enhancing drugs, that's less a comment about their body and more a comment surrounding substances they may be taking to enhance that body, which I think is a bit more appropriate. So if I saw somebody that I believe might be taking anabolics, I could say, I personally believe that they could be, or they are more likely taking them than not. But again, I'm never going to definitively state. Is surgery common in the fitness industry? To be honest, yes. Same with PEDs. Ultimately, the fitness industry is very heavily driven by how you look. And to improve how you look, oftentimes people resort to means of enhancing how they look through, like I said, surgery, PEDs, etc., etc. Because in a lot of cases, that can improve how well they perform within the industry and could potentially help and aid their career. Can taking enhancements, be that PEDs or surgery, cause some damage? Absolutely, it can, because you are doing something to your body that it essentially doesn't naturally want to do. You're having it surgically enhanced, or you're taking drugs to enhance it. That can cause some damage. Do people consider the recovery side of BBLs and getting surgery done? Absolutely not. And this is something I didn't consider until Sarah mentioned it to me. If you go on TikTok and search BBL recovery, you're going to see some pretty graphic and pretty almost scary and frightening videos surrounding what the recovery process actually looks like. It's far more brutal than I expected, so I'm kind of giving you a bit of a warning now before you do so, if you decide to do so. Not only could this potentially lead to physical damage being within yourself and your health, it could also lead to some mental health damage as well, especially when considering lying about these things. So claiming you haven't had surgery done, or claiming you aren't taking PEDs when in fact you are. Because lying can really contribute to some pretty severe mental health complications, especially in the world we live in, where a lot of social comparisons are occurring, and especially within the fitness industry, where a lot of those comparisons are about our physical image and our bodies. Having somebody lie to you and tell you they achieved something doing something else can either make you believe that you don't have the genetics to achieve what they've achieved, can make you believe that doing what they're doing can help you achieve what they've achieved, only to leave you disappointed with your results, or maybe even have you feeling like you are not good enough or you aren't cut out for what you're trying to achieve, which is not going to do anybody any good, because you're seeing these people that you deem to be better than you and superior to you. How's that going to make you feel about yourself? And that can grow into the realm of body image, maybe even body dysmorphia, which can then further contribute to some other potential mental health hindrances as well, like anxiety, potentially depression. But then we also got to kind of flip around is, why might somebody consider a BBL? Why might somebody consider enhancements to some degree? Similar reasons as I previously mentioned. People have maybe lied to them, claiming that they haven't taken something or haven't done something when they have, and left them feeling not very satisfied with their results. Therefore, they feel like they need to resort to something like enhancements to an extent to achieve what they wanted to achieve or achieve what they expected to achieve. Societal pressures, where you are expected to look certain ways and put under this pressure due to changing beauty standards by the media, by potential peers and influencers online. So many factors to consider. It could also be due to insecurity. It could also be due to careers as well. Like I said earlier, the fitness industry is heavily focused on how you look, unfortunately. So sometimes people feel like to skyrocket their career or to be something in the industry, to stand out perhaps, they might have to do something that maybe they don't even want to do, but they feel like they need to do. As a man, I have my own pressures. I have my own societal pressures and own expectations to look a certain way and to be a certain way. And I feel like in many cases, if I don't look a certain way, I'm not good enough, or perhaps I'm seen as lesser or worse than somebody else. But I can only imagine the pressures that women must feel, where people are getting surgery done, people are taking PEDs as well, and it's leading them to feel like, well, genetically, I don't have the shape or the structure to develop a physique like that. So in order for me to do so, maybe I do need to consider surgery to change the shape of my glutes, to enhance my glute size exponentially, whatever it may be. Although I can not relate, because again, it doesn't apply to me personally, I can understand to an extent with my own societal pressures that I'm facing, but I can also sympathise and empathise how hard it must be for a lot of women in the industry when they are bombarded by people who look a certain way, and they feel like if they don't look that way as well, maybe they aren't good enough. In my opinion, how you look does not define your worth, and how you look will never define your worth. How you look does not define your knowledge, how you look does not define your morals, how you look does not define who you are as a person. I'm always a big believer, and obviously you look how you want to look for you. Again, it's not always that easy because we do have pressures to consider, but it's something we can work towards gradually. Having massive glutes should be a product and a desire of you wanting to achieve that look, because it's a look that appeals to you. It shouldn't be because you feel pressured by other people to achieve that certain look, or pressured by the media or the world we live in. It should be because you want it, not because you feel like you have to have it to be something. Your value and your worth as a human is far deeper than physical appearance and physical aesthetic. I personally value how people treat me and how people treat others far more than how they look. Again, I'm not saying that applies to everybody, but it's just me personally. And I feel like a lot more people than you might think probably also value similar things. Although it's very easy for me to say things like this online in front of the camera when I'm in the safety of my own home right now and not understanding the pressures or experiences that you might have to deal with, I can merely just try and give my opinion and my input and state I would always try and promote as best you can to look how you want to look for you and prioritizing your own happiness. Spending hopefully less time comparing yourself to other people and hopefully less time determining worth based on physical appearance and more time investing that energy into making yourself happier, improving your life and improving the lives of those around you, which again is easier said than done, but it's something we can always consider potentially working towards if we so wish. Those are just my thoughts and opinions. We can certainly make this a series where we kind of explore things in greater detail, or we could even bring back the Natty or Not series if people so wish. Just let me know in the comment section below. But until then, we're going to crack on with comment question of the week. This is actually a question that Moose asked, which I did answer in the comment section, but I think I might answer it here just so other people can get the answer too. Do you consider crossing your wrists during cable press or fly movements when referring to like pec and chest training? And ultimately the answer personally is no. So when you're doing cable crossovers, people typically go like this with their wrists and alternate. I'm not a fan of that due to the inconsistent arm path. That can also hinder us from standardizing the technique. When you are looking at like shortening the pecs to a greater degree, instead of crossing over, I would typically actually just do a different movement in general. As I recommended to Moose, he considers something like a cable press around, where you would essentially press, and instead of stopping where you would typically stop with the fly, you would press around. So it's like a unilateral movement, giving you that greater range of motion and take you to a more shortened position for the pecs. That is it. That is a video. If you like the video, please let me know you like the video by liking the video and potentially even subscribing to the channel. And if you too have a question you want me to answer at the end of the next video, then please consider dropping it down below in the comment section for comment question of the week, and I shall do so. Thank you for tolerating me. Thank you for tolerating my extensive and seemingly never-ending waffle, and thank you for tolerating the video.